Archaeologically speaking, there are few discoveries that might have brought the world to a standstill when they were unearthed, simply due to the magnitude of their importance. The Rosetta Stone, the site of Pompeii, and even the Tomb of Tutankhamun all stand out as some fine examples of incredible archaeological discovery that were not only fascinating to comprehend, but essential in opening and looking through the window to the past. By that same vein, the Dead Sea Scrolls of the Qumran Caves also holds its own as one of the most exciting and important discoveries ever made by man, a discovery that provided invaluable insight for scholars and historians hoping to shine a light on what the Bible was like some 2,000 years ago. But what are these Dead Sea Scrolls exactly? Why is the knowledge considered within them so sought after? And what significance does the Great Scroll of Isaiah have in greater biblical understanding? Today on this new series, we'll be analysing each and every piece of the Dead Sea Scrolls that we can get our hands on, starting first with the Great Scroll of Isaiah, found in Cave 1 of Qumran. Before we get started on today's episode, a brief message from the sponsor of today's video, Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail was once an actual route nearly 2,000 miles long that connected the Missouri River to the valleys in Oregon. It was used by around 500,000 settlers that consisted of miners, farmers, merchants, and their families. With the game Oregon Trail, you can experience the very same route as it was a couple hundred years ago, where you can learn about real-life people from history, discover historical facts, and visit iconic locations. Along your journey through the trail, you'll have to complete objectives, such as ensuring your band of travelers are safe and content as you guide them towards their destination. This can include feeding your party, maintaining the wagon, hunting wild game, navigating tricky terrain, and making sure your party members maintain their health, stamina, morale, and hygiene. God damn it, Abigail. Individual members of your party can be chosen from the character select screen, and you can choose from a varied set of characters, from an adventurer, a farmer, a reverend, and a banker. Each character is better suited to certain tasks. For instance, I sent my adventurer to hunt down the local game in the area, and my party fed for a week. But when I sent my reverend to try the same thing, we ended up getting trampled by bison. Smart choices are crucial when playing the Oregon Trail, as one wrong move could see your party decimated by the roadside. My favourite part of the Oregon Trail are the fantastic backdrops that really set the tone for the game. With an ever-changing night and day cycle, the Oregon Trail makes for some stunning visuals that really come alive as you embark on your journey. The Oregon Trail is available right now on PC and Nintendo Switch. Be sure to click the link in the description below and play the Oregon Trail today. And now back to today's episode. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a collection of 800 documents found in 11 caves near Qumran, an ancient settlement in the West Bank. First discovered in 1947 by mere chance by a group of young shepherds, the story goes that one of the shepherds cast a rock into an opening on the side of a cliff. To his surprise, the rock sounded like it had shattered something on the other side, and so he and his friends entered the opening only to find large clay jars, some of which contained several scrolls. These scrolls would be the earliest known Hebrew documents, those that dated back over 700 years before even the birth of Christ. For these exceptionally lucky shepherds, payday was coming early. An antiquities dealer offered to buy the scrolls from them, which were then studied and determined to be over 2,000 years old. Once this became common knowledge, it wasn't long before treasure hunters and archaeologists descended upon Qumran in search of more of these priceless relics. With such a volume of people searching for these precious scrolls, it wouldn't be long until the surrounding caves were also explored, and it was there that tens of thousands of additional fragments were unearthed. Most of the scrolls found were written in Hebrew, with only a small amount written in Greek or Aramaic. Some were written on papyrus, but for the most part, many of the texts were written on parchment, which would explain why a large chunk of them survived only as fragments. Still, as with any ancient text, whether it be fragmented Mesopotamian tablets or long forgotten about Hebraic scrolls, you'd be surprised at what technology and scholars can do to reconstruct fully fledged details from otherwise ruined documents. Indeed, not everything was salvageable, and even today, it is unknown just exactly what may have been contained within each individual cave, but close to 1,000 of these damaged texts were saved from the brink of complete ruin, which in itself is a massive victory in the pursuit of knowledge, and maybe even spiritual enlightenment. The contents of the Dead Sea Scrolls can be categorized in 3 ways: biblical, apocryphal, and sectarian. As far as the biblical manuscripts go, these would be documents that were already found in the Hebrew Bible, things like the Book of Samuel, Ezekiel, or even Psalms. Nearly 200 of the texts found within the Dead Sea Scrolls were actually just copies of well-known biblical stories, and whilst that's less exciting in terms of content, it does show us the earliest evidence of biblical texts, and provided insight on what people some 2,000 years ago read. Apocryphal manuscripts, meanwhile, these being the stories and ideas that were not included in the biblical canon, the likes of demons, spirits, and angelic warfare, was where the magic was hidden. These works, because of their alienation from traditional Jewish belief, were likely unknown to the average believer, and with some outlandish ideas, including celestial encounters, they invited scholars to view a form of earlier religion, buzzing with new ideas and uncommon tropes. Lastly, sectarian manuscripts introduce scholars to fresh ideas, biblical commentaries, religious writings, the philosophies of a people who existed long before, that until that very moment had been lost to the world. While still up for some debate, it's probable that these Dead Sea Scrolls had belonged to an ancient people of Qumran, and had formed a considerable chunk of their collective library. However, during the Roman period, it's possible that these texts were hidden in an effort to preserve the local teachings and to protect them from being confiscated or burned by the palpable threat of Roman presence. Since the times of the 1950s, when Qumran was swarming with excavators, no other ancient text has been found in and around the site, and it's possible that the 11 caves that house these near-fabled documents, as well as the surrounding areas, have all been picked clean. Still, that allows us to gush over some of the incredible works found from this literary treasure haul, none the least being, arguably, the most astonishing piece from Qumran Cave 1, the Great Scroll of Isaiah. It is one of the only biblical scrolls that was preserved in its entirety, and considering it measures 734 centimeters long, that's quite miraculous. Scholars have also determined that the scroll was written between the year 356 and the year 100 before the Common Era, easily marking it as one of the oldest preserved scrolls of the bunch. Considering what we know of Isaiah, and his tendency to preach in particular length about the coming of the Messiah, it shows us that the ancient people of Qumran not only valued the words of this prophet, but that they also resonated with the sentiments of messianic belief, and/or Isaiah's vivid prophecies of judgment and the end times. Besides being an impressive 24 feet in length, and written on 17 sheets of parchment paper, the Great Scroll of Isaiah is written in Hebrew, and contains what is essentially the complete story of Isaiah, from beginning to end. What was once considered to be the oldest complete copy of the Book of Isaiah was completely outshined by this discovery at Qumran, predating it by at least 1,000 years. As you can imagine, we can't possibly know the author of this text, and whilst it was likely a shared work constructed throughout several lifetimes, the number of hands at work is impossible to say. Scholarly research indicates that adjustments and corrections to the text were made, particularly by the scribe who wrote the Rule of the Community, another Dead Sea Scroll, though again, it is hard to determine for sure. What we do know for sure is that from radiocarbon dating, as already specified, proposed dates for the authorship of the scroll go as far back as the year 356 before the Common Era, with scholars proposing several dates from and since then to around the year 100 before the Common Era. Given these proposed dates of the Isaiah Scroll's authorship, it coincides with a long debated theory that the Dead Sea Scrolls were indeed a library of an ancient Qumranic people, more specifically, the Essenes. The Essenes were believed to be a mystical Jewish sect, that existed in great numbers through Roman Judea. Roman writer Pliny the Elder appears to be the first to mention these people in his Natural History, saying of them that they were a moneyless people, who were priestly and celibate. Such a description is also backed by Jewish historian Josephus, who described the Essenes in his book, The Jewish War, as being a mystical people who prioritized peace, observed the Sabbath, promoted celibacy, took no slaves on the belief that every man was equal, and even immersed themselves in water. The 66 chapters of the Great Isaiah Scroll first show us a time when the kingdom of Judah was still standing, a prosperous time where the king Uzziah reigned with great political, commercial, and social success. Resources were plentiful, relations with neighbouring states were reliable, and the confidence that Uzziah incited within his people made them feel secure and at ease. The system seemed to work, but the increase of wealth and how it was distributed would begin to cause great economic disruptions, as the gap between rich and poor began to increase at an alarming rate. Revolts were promised by the poor, conceitedness was demonstrated by the rich, and to make matters worse, the looming threat of an Assyrian invasion was definitely on the cards. Yet due to Uzziah's competence as a leader, the people weren't as stressed out as they otherwise might have been. Indeed, there were catastrophic problems at hand, but with an exemplary king as Uzziah, the people were confident that he'd find a solution, until he caught leprosy. Panic began to set in immediately. Unease crept upon Judah on all sides, and the sight of their sickly king only turned the once thriving kingdom into a desolate territory, where anxiety and uncertainty flooded the streets. With Uzziah forced to leave Jerusalem to live in a leper colony, his son Jotham ascended the throne. Jotham, though, lacked all of the qualities his father possessed. He could not inspire the people, he could not ease their worries, and he could not stand up to the Assyrians when they came knocking. Yet the people still held hope that Uzziah would recover and resume his rule at such a pivotal time, until he died. During this time of unrest, Uzziah became a prophet. He'd had visions that he believed were from God himself, and whilst the state of Judah turned into a state of disarray and chaos, Uzziah maintained his resolve. Despite Judah's darkest hour dawning upon them, Uzziah relayed his words that his God still controlled the nation, even if the current king did not. With the Judean kingdom having fallen from its former glory, Uzziah interpreted that his God wanted immediate action to rectify the damage. But because communicating the heavy and divine words of his God was a difficult task, especially in such times of political unrest, Uzziah pleaded that he was not the man for the job. But after some convincing, Uzziah bears the burden and approaches the task with a new sense of purpose. The ministry of Uzziah lasted for around half a century, which would see Uzziah live through many reigns, including Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and Manasseh. His declarations of the word of his God brought him into conflict with both priests and kings, simply for the strong sentiments of his words, those which you may equate to as hard truths. At times, his preaching of the word of his God acquired so much opposition that he was no longer safe, and was required to withdraw from public speaking and confine himself to smaller groups of disciples. Amongst his many hard truths, Uzziah petitioned for fairer distribution of wealth, better treatment of the poor, and expressed condemnation of the rich taking advantage of the less fortunate, sentiments that were primarily backed by his God. Uzziah proved to be fearless in the face of the kings of Judah, even protesting against the king Ahaz, warning him about his choice to commit to an alliance with the Assyrians. In more political unrest, the northern territories of a now much diminished Judah threatened Ahaz to join them in a coalition against the Assyrians as sort of a last-ditch attempt to resist the invaders. But because Ahaz was so scared of the Assyrians, he actually prepared to appeal to them for help, and would essentially march against his own people with the enemy. It was Uzziah again who attempted to make the king see reason, and told him that if he wanted to win the war and do the right thing, he should give up to God and make peaceful reforms within the city first. Then glory would be delivered unto him. Unfortunately, Ahaz didn't believe in Isaiah's prophecy and decided to go ahead with his plan and join the Assyrian Empire, making Judah a subservient and ultimately conquered territory. During the reign of King Hezekiah, meanwhile, attempts were made to curb the rising power of the Assyrians. The first attempt was to form an alliance with anyone who would extend a hand, and these hands came in the form of the Egyptians and the Babylonians. Hezekiah, who recognized that Judah could not stand up to the Assyrians alone, decided to throw in with both the Egyptians and the Babylonians. But again, it was Isaiah who had foreseen that this would be a terrible mistake. He proceeded to lecture Hezekiah as he did with Ahaz, telling him that the only way for Judah to achieve salvation was to accept not the hand of the Egyptians or the Babylonians, but instead the hand of God. In every interaction that Isaiah has with people who were arguably far more powerful than him, at least in a political or physical sense, Isaiah was confident that the people of Judah would be triumphant. Despite the overwhelming odds of public unrest, the failing economic system, the collapse of morale, and the devastating military arrangement of the Assyrian Empire weighing on it, Isaiah never once doubted the vision given to him by his God, that Judah would in effect rise again. Isaiah's very purpose was to realize the plan of his God and to deliver it onto his people, to make them see the divine truth that they had sorely lost sight of. Hezekiah, to his credit, did end up heeding the advice of Isaiah, and so did not yield to the demands of the Assyrians. Within a short time of his defiance, the Assyrian army withdrew, and for those days, Isaiah was proven right. A key point of the Great Isaiah Scroll shows Isaiah's continued hope for his nation, as well as the promise of a deliverer, an anointed one, who will someday occupy Jerusalem and rule the nation with complete righteousness. Under his leadership, the poor and oppressed will be strengthened and ennobled, whilst the rich and the tyrannical will be stricken and punished. In one prophecy, we see this anointed one depicted as the ideal king, who not only understands right from wrong in its fullest extent, but also ensures that justice is served. Over the years of Isaiah's life, the concept of this anointed one, this Messiah, evolved into a number of different meanings, from priests to kings to even a divine entity that would rule over the world. The concept of this Messiah would go on to become one of the core beliefs and most essential ideas in Judaism as we know it, with the Messiah obviously now being synonymous with Jesus. Of course, when we look a bit closer, we see Isaiah continually foreshadow the arrival of Jesus. He states in 7:14, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son," which is an obvious nod to the Virgin Mary giving birth to Jesus, and Jesus being this sign of the Lord. By the later chapters of the book, most notably chapters 52 and 53, he even speaks of Jesus' sacrifice, stating, "Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors." Through such sayings, we understand that the promise of Jesus was thought to have been predicted some many moons before he ever did walk the earth, considering the age of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and perhaps it was a metaphorical hope that the ancients would hold on to in dire times, that someone was coming to save them. With this in mind, and considering how many times Isaiah speaks of this anointed one, you might say that the Great Scroll of Isaiah is something of a testament for the ancient people's hope in the Lord, and that one day in the future he would send down his son to save them, not only from their enemies, but perhaps even from themselves. The Great Isaiah Scroll shows us the ancient attitude towards two things: judgment and salvation. Throughout the first 39 or so chapters, Isaiah goes about attempting to persuade or outright condemn people of political power and the everyday man, urging them to change their ways for the good of themselves and for the good of the nation. But time and time again, Isaiah appears to be knocked back, and his words fall on deaf ears. The early chapters are quite clear on the judgment aspect. He warns people not to sin and not to turn their backs on God, because if they do, the ruin they try so desperately to avoid will always overtake them. On the other hand, if they could just trust God and live their lives as He had told them for generations, then they would be saved, and the ruin that was heading for Jerusalem would have been miraculously averted. Of course, these all just sound like fairy tales to the people of Jerusalem, and so, in some ways, the Great Isaiah Scroll shows us that it is not external factors that see to our downfall. It is not the failing system, the economic breakdown, the invading Assyrians for Judah, but rather people's lack of faith. Judgment and salvation are two of the most common themes sewed into the Great Scroll of Isaiah, for in a sense, one cannot go without the other. Isaiah makes it clear that not everyone will be saved, because not everyone is God-fearing, and as is demonstrated in the story, even the kings are keen to rely on their own strength, money, power, and guile than to even consider trusting Isaiah's God. And it's true that some kings and figures in the Bible do achieve some noteworthy successes by relying on such things, but when the end times come, Isaiah promises a reckoning. The final lines of the scroll sum up the sentiments of Isaiah's God quite succinctly, as he declares, "From one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all mankind will come and bow down before me, says the Lord. And they will go out and look on the dead bodies of those who rebelled against me. The worms that eat them will not die. The fire that burns them will not be quenched, and they will be loathsome to all mankind." Let me know your thoughts on today's first episode of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and tell me what other texts you'd like to see me cover. I'll likely be going through each of the Qumran Caves reading lists, and picking out the most significant texts that might provide some insights to a much earlier form of religion, as well as doing my best to highlight some of the more otherworldly and bizarre stories that the Bible appears to have completely neglected. Anyway, don't forget to give this video a like, hit subscribe, and toggle the notification bell too, so you don't miss an upload from me. Until next time.